Again, that's the idea of the number 10, collecting all the different singulars into a grouping again. So we have there the story that's about Sarah Mamot Mivra Olam. So this is just obviously, as the Rebbe writes in Tanya in the second Chelik in the Shah Yuchad Ve'amuna, based on the Ari, that all of creation comes from the 10 Ma'amarot, whether it is the specific, because you look at the Psukim only deal with species, not even species, brought so Nefesh Chayol Lemina, which includes all the species that you know about. So where's the source of the Kavod Shema in each specific type of species, which are so endless that no one can at the moment even know them, because we haven't totally explored the bottom of the ocean, or we explored the totality of the Amazon. But Apo PK, it's clear. So he writes over there discussing by Archava how they come out of the different sirufim of the oisius of those psukim with the numerical value. It's actually written, discussed in the Ramak. It's called Reish Lamed Hey Sha'arim. There's every letter has 235 variants of it, and you want to read the Ramak. Maybe I'll send it to you one day just to show you the list. Okay, but I'm not going to do that here because we have to continue. And yes, so there's so many different variants coming out of what you would call the Asar Mamor Shabbat Torah. So, but basically there are 10 gvulos, and then there's the numerical value, the etc. These are the things which create the chiyus of each and every phenomenon, and each one of them comes out of the Asar Mamor. So there is a 10 major categories of Kvod Shemayim, which are afterwards expressed in the specifics of each and every one. Yes, when we talk about the Asar Ma'amarot, we're talking about the Asara categories of Kavod Shemayim, which can be found specifically in a positive way from all the 10, all the species coming out of the Asar Ma'amarot. But what about all the negative species? What about a pork? What about a porcupine? These are things which, well, maybe a porcupine you can use, things which are also bachilu ba'anoah, for example. What are you going to do with that? What are the Kavod Shemayim in chaylev? Well, you could say for korbanos. What's the Kavod Shemayim in different types of things which are totally osur mizbeach? And the answer, achda. Ki afal pk. Although it is very true that there is specific limits of Kavod Shemayim which only deal on the positive, constructive side of existence, one has to understand there's no such thing as anything outside of God. Because once we're going to say there's something outside of God, we've made God into finite, and that is not what Jews believe in. But these are psukim and Navi, Ani Avaya Lo Shinisi. I, the infinite source of all, have never changed. And there is no change in the infinite. The infinite, in an illogical way, expresses himself in finite form. And as we discussed in the past, since logic is a creative form, therefore I don't even think or dream that I will try to explain that with logic. But I can at least define what it is. Everything, in one way or the other, is an expression of God's will and whim. Even the filthy places, we mean to say even places which are totally negate God. Even Batei Avodah Zarah. Believe me, Vatican St. Peter's Square would not exist if not that it's a Ratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Ratzon of every Bria is a Ratzon of Kavod, because there is no Ratzon of Bria outside of Kavod, as we said, L'chvodi, Brativ, Yetzativ, Afasitiv. So obviously there's a Ratzon of Kavod in St. Paul's and in St. Peter's, and V'chulu, in Notre Dame, whatever you want. So he says, what is this? Achda, ki em mekablim mibchinat mamar satum. And here I have to explain something. The Gemara says in Shabbos, very interesting Gemara, beautiful Gemara, that the Gemara says that a certain person came, a Melamed Darika came, and started teaching Aleph Beis. And he said they taught things that no one knew since the times of Yeshua ben Nun. Look up the Gemara in Kuf Daled and Shabbos. And he literally discussed the Aleph Beis. Now, I want you to know before I go further, there are quite a few midrashim dealing with the Aleph Beis, which explain the structure of the letters, the phonetics of the letters, etc., and what they mean. There's Aleph, a big medrash, which today we have a very broad version of it, because we found multitude versions of it in the Geniza. It's called Otiot Rabbi Akiva. Otiot Rabbi Akiva. There's 2 kisveyat on this. I repeat, we have quite a few copies of this in the Geniza. This is old. Osius Rebbe Akiva. Latter day, we have the Shalom, which deals with this, based on that and other pieces of Zohar. And we actually have a tremendous book by Rav Kook called Reish Milin, which is a phenomenal sefer, which is not usually studied. It's heavily Kabbalistic, but it was written when he was stuck during the war in England. He was actually written in London. Interesting. When he was over there, it's Chaim, I think the name of his shul was at the time. No, where was it?
It was Machzike Adas.
What? Machzike Adas?
Machzike Adas, yeah. I think, in the East End.
Machzike Adas. Yeah, in the East End, yeah. Machzike, that's Rabbi Perlman used to be the rabbi, right?
The Northwest London version, yeah.
Yeah, the Northwest London, I remember that, right. So the Machzike, this is what the Rav was, and he wrote it there. Ad Kedei Kach the Stunder Yaakov Moshe Charlap wrote a letter. He says, I don't know how you could possibly have written this there. There must be some kind of a pipeline going straight from the Koisel Maravi to the East End, and somehow you're breathing that air, because there's no way you could have written this in Chutz La'aretz. Very poetic, very, very sweet, and very nice. You know, I don't think that there's people who actually now will say that there was a pipeline leading to London. Well, but the poetry is beautiful. So anyway, I'm not in any way denigrating Rav Kook. I think it was a Goyen Tzaddik Yesod Olam. But come on, sometimes you have to realize that certain things belong to the prophets and not to the poets. So it says over there that he described, he says over there, Mamar Mem Psucha, Mamar Patuach. Mem Stuma, Mamar Satum. Now, what does Mem Psucha, what does Mamar Patuach mean? And what does Mamar Satum mean? There's a Mamar B'Kadosh Baruch Hu, which is Satum. Mem Stuma, there's like no way out. It's like it's like, in English, in Yiddish, we call it Schloss Mem. It's like a castle. It's closed, a Schloss, if you know your German. A Schloss Mem, Schloss. Schloss means castle. It also means lock. Okay? It's a locked place, a Schloss Mem. And then you have Mem. Mem Ptucha, as you know, there's a hole, there's a bottom where you can come out of. The Gemara says, I'll explain those letters in a minute. So Mem Psucha, Mem Sus, Maimer Sama. So the Marshal writes over there. He writes, Ayin Chidushi God is Shabbos Kuf Dalit. Divra Masa Mem Stuma Mem Stuma Mem Sasu Maimer Sasu. What does that mean? It says, what is Mamar Satum? What does Mamar Patuach means? So the Gemara says, based on the Mishnah in Avos, it says, Basar Mamar's Nivra Aylo. And the Mishnah says, I'm sorry, but there's only 9 Mamoros. You look at how many times is there in the Pasuk, Vayomer, Vayehi. There's only 9. Yet the Mishnah says there are 10. So the Gemara says, Bereshis Nami Maimerhu. Bereshis is also a Maimer, but it's a Maimer which it doesn't say Vayomer Bereshis Elohi, or it doesn't say that. It says Vayomer Kimiyor, but Bereshis Bar Lokim is a Shemaim Vesoris. There's no Vayomer. Taking for what does it mean? Bereshis Nami Maimerhu. That's the Gemara. Zokta Gemara show without explaining. That's the Mamar Satum. It's a Mamar which is, so to speak, Satum versus the other ones are Mamar Patua. What does this mean? Okay, so what this really means is found in a Maimer of the Tzemach Tzedek in his book Derech Mitzvah. In a Maimer at the end of the book called Divra Amascha V'Ulam Chai Ani. I'm giving you the reference that you can afterwards look up, and I'm hoping that someone will. So he writes over there and describes what it means. You see, when we talk about speech by God, what do we mean? He obviously doesn't have vocal cords, and believe me, he wasn't bellowing it out in a baritone. Okay, there was no sound waves. There was nothing to vibrate at the time. There was nothing there, so there couldn't have been any sounds anyway. So what does it mean? He spoke. What does it mean? God spoke. What does this really mean? I'll predicate this with something I saw once, very beautiful book. I don't usually read the book, but I read the Akdama. There was a rabbi in Pinsk, the rabbi of Pinsk called Reb Aaron Walken. His grandson was a mashgiach in Ateres Yisrael, Chaimke. So he passed away, Zechron Levracha, a sweet man. But his Gzeda was a goyin, was mamish migdoli goyin yador. He was an unbelievable, great person. He was a son-in-law of, he was a brother-in-law of Reb Zalman Sorotzkin. You really want to know. He was Reb Aaron, he was the Pinsker Rav, Reb Aaron Volkin. So he has a book on Bab Metzia. I'm telling you the truth. I never read the book, but I read the Akdama. Why did I read the Akdama? Because a friend of mine showed me the Akdama. It was worth reading. So he writes. So he's supposed to be writing to his notebook. He says, "My dear notebook, you know how much time I spent in you, how much thought, how much every word was so precious to me. I mean, how much I didn't sleep at night. But now I'm sending you off to the public, and they will misconstrue, and they will see things which are not there, and they will not see things which are there." But that's the way it is when you print and talk to people. They don't hear what you have to say, they hear what they want to hear in it. My poor Machberet, I wish you luck. This is how he writes the Akdama book. I wish you luck. I'm praying you won't be terribly battered and misconstrued. This is the Akdama, beautiful Akdama, original person. So here you have it. You know what Dibur is? Dibur is when I think, my thoughts don't have anything more than what I meant into them. I think I know what I think about, and I know exactly what's in my thought, and I don't exactly misconstrue what I think. Those are the same letters and the same symbolism. You can't exactly think without symbolism. No such thing. Okay, it's called Vayomer El Libai, right? When we talk about thinking or meditating, you're speaking in your heart. Equals, you're not articulating it externally, but you have defined forms. There's no such thing as thought without symbolism. You're thinking words, you're thinking symbolism. I don't know, take your dreams and figure what you're thinking about. They are very lucid, defined stories. Okay, did you ever dream with a Be'em Shechim? When I was a kid, I used to dream, okay, tomorrow we'll get the continuance of the story. You know what I mean? So you have a story that you're thinking about. But whatever you think, whatever is in your mind, in your heart, that's what you're thinking. That's what's there. No one can misconstrue it. As soon as you articulate it and free it to the public, it's like Baron Vulcan printed his book. You're inviting other people to interpret you. Now, no one has a clue of what you really think, what you really mean, because they don't have your cultural background. So what words mean to you don't mean the same thing to other people. I experience this on a daily basis. Okay. And I always have to hold myself back. Well, I have to think, well, how am I going to say this in a way that these little 18-year-olds or 20-year-olds or 22-year-olds will understand what I'm talking about when I'm doing this because whatever information I have in my mind. So these words express to me what I really mean. Yet to them, it can only express what their cultural baggage will entail. They can't understand more than what's in their mind. Okay. So basically, when I talk, I'm inviting other people to misconstrue, to basically take my words and give their own subjective meaning to it. Hopefully, if they know me enough, that's what a Talmud really is. A Talmud is a person which not doesn't learn the words, but understands the feeling and the thought process of the teacher, thus figures out what did he mean in these words. That's where the Gemara says, "Ein adam oimid al das rabbi elo la'achar ba'im shana." No, you're at the age where you can understand what the man meant. Okay, that's what it is. We're married. Most of us are married, so we understand what that means. It took a long time to figure out what does she mean. Okay, it's a whole different cultural reality. You have to really get into it. So here the chachma is to be that's what I respect psychologists if they're good, because they're being trained to listen and to figure out what the other person really means and what that person is saying. I hope that's a competent professional psychologist. Well, actually, all listeners are not. Most listeners take the words you say and translate them to themselves. So when God spoke, what was he really doing? He was expressing his will and his whim and giving freedom of misconstruing interpretation. When God said, let there be light, now you're going to define what light is and what for. Let there be this, you're going to define what it is and what's for. You may by the chance hit it on the nail what God wants, but most of us will ultimately end up giving it meaning outside of what true meaning is. We don't even give it the meaning of science. We give it a very functional meaning, and not a mathematical meaning, not a scientific meaning. That we don't think of the metaphysical meaning. What is the purpose of this animal in the God's plan? That's definitely not what we're thinking about. That's not our language. We've taken the words of the Torah and put ourselves in. It's very common today. I hear these drushes on Tanakh, and I say to myself, goodness sakes, there's Lamed Beis Klal, just like there's Yud Gimel Midas Shater in the Dreshes Bo in Drash of Halacha. There's Lamed Beis Midas of Rabbi Yosef Giliv, how to do it in Agada. how to read Mikra in agadic fashion. I don't know if you know, but the klal is Einodam Dung Zereshoma Miatzmai. This is a klal Godel. And now I hear so many people saying words of Chumash making Zereshavas. There's a buzzword here and a buzzword there, and they connect themes. That's a Zereshavas, Shein Adam Miatzmai. Yet today it's free, we do whatever we want. We create realities of how we see Pshuta Shemikra. And this is not even beginning Pshatim Shemischatshim B'choyim. Pshatim Shemischatshim Yomim Pshashim Pshat. Making drushes or saying, well, this represents this, the moon represents X, and the sun represents Y. That is not drash. That is whatever it is. I don't want to say what it is. I can honestly say I would not make a Birchas Torah on any of this. Not pshat, it's not remez, not drush, definitely not pshuta shel mikra. So therefore, once again, so what are we doing? People take the words of the Bible and now do whatever they want with it. They literally do whatever they want with it, and they create midrashim, they create unbelievable, beautiful stuff, but it's got nothing to do with God's Torah. It's what you call prostitution of the text, using God's text for self-gratification. That's what I perceive this as, and nothing more than that. You can understand a certain school of thought out there, which I have very serious disdain of. Okay, and it's quite a popular school, but what can I do? So Jesus is also popular. Anyway, so popularity doesn't mean anything. Okay, I'm popular. So what? It doesn't. That and a $1.50 will get me a cup of coffee in Starbucks. In the old days, when it was only a $1.50. Okay, that's about it. So the idea behind it is that speaking, when God speaks, that means He's giving you free will. He's giving you the capable of walking out of His domain and making your own world. That's Ma'amar Patuach, and that's symbolized in the letter Mem Ptucha. Because what's a Mem Ptucha? The Gemara says on the in that Gemara on the Aleph Beis in Menach, it says Mipnei Ma Gagoy Shel Ches Mipnei Ma Ragoy Shel Hey Tluya. Why is the left or right, whatever you can be, of the hay hanging in the air? It's not tied up to anything, right? The small little thing on your left side of the hay when you face the hay, it's hanging. The Gemara says, well, it's in order. First of all, the bottom is that if you fall out. We can fall out. It's called open space in the letter. It symbolizes the freedom of walking away from. Do what you want. Why is that hanging? Because if you want to go back into the hole, you can't go through where you came. You have to go around the yud. There's a yud hanging there. Through you have to revise the yud equals your world of thought. Yud is the idea of thought. And then you read through the world, reassessing your value system, then you can go back into the box. Tshuva does not mean just, okay, I'm sorry, and going back where you came from. It's rebuilding a whole new reason of being there. That is the idea of, hey, the klal in Chazal is, the Gemara said that an open space is the idea of capability of walking out or going into. So for mem psucha, it means to say, it basically means, yes, there's a mamar patuach. That's expressed in the letter mem, where there's an opening, you can leave. You can misconstrue. That's the mem of the maimer patuach, when it says yehi, vayomer yehi, vayomer yehi, yomer yehi. What does the mem stuma mean? It means that the maimer in the thought of God not given to man. It's God thinking about it. It's God thinking, I want a world, and I want this, and I want that, and I will have to express my will. But I first articulate, Vayomer Eliboy. What he's doing is, he is creating in his machshava, which is also a creation, just as Dibur is a creation. So obviously for infinity to think in terms is also a form of creation. It's a creation of the world the way God wants it and its purpose and meaning. It's called Kavod Shamayim. And that is a mem stuma. You are surrounded by it with nothing to do with your free will or your comprehension. You're there. You're in the schloss. You're there in the castle, so to speak. God hovers around you. Is what we call in Tanya and Zarakosh or Hasove. It is the light of God which you can't comprehend. You have no clue what it is, but you can deduce it's there because there can't be anything outside of Him. But you have no clue what it is. And therefore you can't misconstrue it. It's there. It is the light that it's part of our life, the light, God of science, the God of math, that we can now misconstrue and say, well, it's for purpose A, not for purpose B. It's like food is not used for nutrition, it's used for obsessive desires. It's like people define themselves by sexual orientation and don't think this has anything to do with procreation, and so on and so forth. Humanity has a way of giving meaning to things which have nothing to do with objective reality. It's called the world of dreams. The whole Pirkei Rebbe Lazar, which describes when the serpent is encountered with the Nacha, with Eve, with Chava, he tells him, "V'yisim Elohim, you create worlds." What worlds are they created? The answer, you create the worlds of imagination. Yes, we said the Satan, the Nachash, was a serpent and looked as if he was a camel. He created imaginary realities. Okay, this is what the Pirkei Rebbe Lazar describes. We create imaginative reality. It was a very nice book when I was growing up, dealing with how to deal with your thoughts, called The Antidote, by a guy called Shraga Silverstein. I suggest looking for it in Amazon. Great book to give to teenagers. It helped me when I was a teenager. So remember the name, The Antidote by Shraga Silverstein. I haven't seen it bestomach for 50, 60 years, but I still have the good taste in it behind what that did for me. So this is what we're talking about here. Do you look at things scientifically, metaphysically, or do you translate on your own? So there's Maimer Patuach. So you know Bereshis is? Bereshis is what the Ramban describes in being Bereshis. God basically, in that Maimer, he created all the matter of all of existence. And he figured out in his mind, this is going to be this is going to be this. Then he gave it expression, equals. He created a world of God thought equal to cannot be misconstrued. It's there, but it's beyond human comprehension because it wasn't given to man. It wasn't expressed. It lies in the thought of God. Infinity created something without giving it independence of no I-thou relationship. It's a world within God. And then there's the I-thou relationship of expression equals talking, expressing himself to others, allowing that to be misconstrued. That's Mamar Patuach, and that's Mamar Satum. So this is what he writes here. So he says, you should know the existence of these things is beyond human comprehension. They exist in the Bereshis without a Yom Rehi. Shu Bereshis Mamar Satum, that is also a Maimer. There are 10 Mamarot, Tuma and Kfira, all that exists from the world of the Maimer Rishon of Bereshis, not from the Yomer Yehis. Shu Kolel Kol Mamarot. Yes, as the Ramban says, what does it do? Because obviously in the world of Bereshis, there's no fragmentation. It's one Mamar of everything. Fragmentation exists, and once you got expression, so God created the fragmented reality of 9 fragmentations, but the one Kol HaKol is the thing which is not expressed, and there's no fragmentation. V'kulam kiblim chiyut mimenu. V'kavod shemamar satum. Now ask, well, what is the kavod shemayim in the mamar satum? Well, by definition, it's mamar satum. It means something you cannot comprehend. You can only deduce. It's beyond your comprehension. It's beyond any human. It's beyond the comprehension because it precedes logic. So really want to know, there's a certain logical reality of why God created cows. Yes, because A, there's going to be tashmish kedusha coming from a cow. B, a Jew can partake of it and therefore elevate its status, and the daimim tzomeach and the chai, which is there, the minerals which come from earth into the vegetation, or you can elevate and make it purposeful and meaningful. There's a kavod shemayim found in every cow you see, in every chicken you see. But what about the stuff that will never meet man? What about all the things in the Amazon which we still don't know about, will never meet man? They are not there for kavod shemayim of man encountering them because there's not going to be an encounter. Right? There's so many different things happening in the cosmos, for goodness sakes, which man will never know. I mean, maybe he will, but you never know. But eons of time where man doesn't even know where man figured out how many rings there are in Saturn. It took a long time. And you think, what were they before? Where's the kavod shemayim there before with man not being able to comprehend? And the answer lies in the fact that, well, you could say that Malachi Elokim understand, possibility. The simpler way of understanding that Bereshis Maimer Sasum, it's a kavod shemayim which is not comprehended. אי אפשר לקבל, כשהוא שמשם הם מקבלים חיות, כי מבחינת הכבוד והמאמרים המתגלים, אי אפשר להם לקבל חיות משם. מבחינת וכבודי לאחר לא ייתן. My explicit covet, the pasuk says, כבודי לאחר לא ייתן. My covet, which is expressed, which is a relative relationship, covet of you encountering and acknowledging the hierarchical reality, לאחר, those who are outside of the park, they will not have that. There will not be a covet which is comprehended in the klippas. Rak b'mar satum, shu nistar b'tachlit hastara, misham mikablim chiyut. So when asked, how is it possible that there is a energy allowing covet shamai of eating ham sandwich on Yom Kippur? And the answer is, yeah, that's mamar satum. You know, get this straight. Logic is a created form. The only understand the kavod of that which is comprehended. In a nice way, everything in this world is kavod shemayim. But the kavod hagalui, the kavod hanishtar. What it is beyond my comprehension, I do not know. Yet it's called kavod. That means there's a revelation of the uniqueness of God in there. I don't know. No one knows. It can't be no. It's mamar satum. Then he adds, as a typical Reb Blachman, he doesn't want you to contemplate it, he just wants you to know it. Don't bother, just accept this, because if you believe in infinity, that means that everything has to be an expression of the oneness of God. And the pasuk says it's covered, and covered means acknowledgement, and yet there's no way we can acknowledge. So that's called mamar satum. Again, kisha adam nofel chas v'shalom. Now here says something unbelievable. Person falls into terrible places. Doubt. Yeah, I remember that. Falling into questions, falling into where the hell are you? You know what I mean? Like, when I was a kid, where were you in the Holocaust? So shall we go on and on? Or some people kids fall away in a terrible way, you know what I mean? But if you're trained to constantly ask, where is God? If you lived a life of whatever I do, where's God in this for me? So even when you fall, if you're trained to think in that way, you're going to ask, well, hell, man, where's God in this? You'll ask it there too. You fell into a terrible place. I can never forget a phone call of a certain student of mine, not from Karen Biavna, for another institution. He had a summer job. He calls, Rebbe, I made a terrible mistake. So what's new? The problem is she's next to me. I was very happy that he called me. You know what I mean? That means that we had an honest connection. But, he fell into, I still remember, in the Makom Ramot. She was not Jewish. But you know what? He called me. Now, this is reminiscent of the person falling, but he's, he has this, like, okay, if there's a God, what's this about? If there's a God, what's this about? I've encountered this I can tell you stories, but I don't want to waste my time. But where's this? Sometimes, especially if you're trained to asking and thinking always you do things, you're looking, where's God? And then you fall into the pits. And we can all fall in the pits. I've seen great people falling into murky places. And says, hey man, all my life I was trying to do kavod shemayim, and here I am in a place where, man, there ain't no way that God is here. Here I am in some Playboy club in Chicago, with Hugh Hefner as my chavrusa. I'm for bunnied all over the place. It's not exactly kavod shemayim here. Okay? See, what he asks is, hey, God, if there's a God, where are you in this? Now, that could be the reason of your total fall. There's no God here. Maybe there's no God anywhere. Because if he's not here, then why would he be anywhere? Because you guys believe in infinite God. There's no God in this. But the flip side is, if you're trained to think there's always a God, there's a God everywhere. And that's how you were trained. And that's what he says in the beginning. That's the one thing you train yourself to do from bar mitzvah. Where's kavod shemayim? Because there is. Then you ask the question, "Me'achar she're'eh atzmo rachok mikvodo, machar shenafal m'komot ha'elu, ze ikar tikuno v'aliyoto." You know how to fix yourself? If I say, man, there must be God here, but I don't understand. Equals God is so beyond my comprehension. It's not there's no God here. There's a God so beyond me, and then wow. Even here, there's a God. I must tell you the honest truth. I will share something from my father. I had this question, as most kids had in my age when we were growing up in post-Holocaust families. We're walking for shul. I asked my dad one day, I remember going back, I still remember, Mamish, it was a Saturday night, why are we religious? Because my friends that I played baseball with or stickball with in the alleys of Chicago, they were not religious. Their parents all learned in Klatskin and Kamenitz, and and they dropped it. And my dad was very, very, very religious. You know what I mean? Torah, Torah, Torah. I says, why are you religious? He says, why are you asking? She says, because Yankel's dad learned there and he's not religious. Because God wasn't there. Well, he wasn't there for you. You lost a wife, a child. You lost 12 siblings, everything. There's no family. Where was he for you? Why do you believe in him? I asked this. I was a little, I must have been 9. But that was normal at the time. You guys wouldn't chop. When we were growing up, 9 years old, you says, "Ma avodas lachem." Yeah, why do it? To say to you guys make it into some guy with a crazy baseball cap. No, Russia. No, it was all of us. We all asked the same question. Read the Chumash there. It's not asking, give me the laws. Tell me, why do I have to keep these laws? That's the question. If you read the Chumash carefully, the Shas Chacham is not give me information, what are the laws? Why should I be bound by them? That's what the Shas Chacham is. And then you look at the Chumash, you'll see it. That's what it means. I don't care what all your Haggadah interpreters write. What it means is, why should I keep these laws? I asked it. I seriously asked it. Okay, and I never challenged God, but I deeply wanted to understand. So I wasn't just going to say because Azayidus. Azayidus, that's the way it is. Sorry, you got the wrong guy. It ain't going to work. Okay? So I remember when a 9-year-old, I said, thank God, it's here. And I'm I know, observant I am. I'm very religious. Okay? And so I remember asking this, my father says, why are we religious? And he looked at me and says, you'll never understand this, but I'm going to tell it to you now. Wherever I was, he was there with me. Just remember that. Now, I still don't know what he meant. But as Mark Anthony said, my dad was an honorable man. And when he said he was with him, I believe him. Okay? I don't know what he meant, but dad was an honorable man. Okay? That's one of the reasons I'm religious. Because the Torah says, it's beyond my asaga. It's Bereshis Maimer Sasum. He was there with him. Gam Kiel Bein Samav Leirora, Ki Atay Madi. Where the alone for you? Are you kidding? Yeah, he's there. Do I understand him? No. Do I see him? No. But he's there. It can't be otherwise. Now, people which attain that, they're the heroes that created the world of post-war. That's when my in-laws went through hell and they built a community in Paris, my parents, etc. That whole generation, they're heroes. The fact that I once spoke to the Masarik Dushin of my parents. He was the chief rabbi of Akko. He was a big tzanzer chassid, big Talmud Chacham. She says, if you see a person with a number on his hand, he's treif, on Yom Kippur, go to him and ask him for a bracha. The fact he still calls himself Jewish is the greatest thing possible. So you go ask him for a bracha. Hey, remember that. I remember it very, very well. Okay, that's what you have to know. You have to chop. Yes, it's beyond comprehension. He's Jewish. He didn't walk away. Okay, that's a super important thing. If you stay in Torah and mitzvahs, God, you're the holiest of the holiest. So this I want us to understand carefully. He says the greatest. How do you take a descent and grow from it by not saying, well, he's not here, by saying he is here and I don't understand him. Wow. Then you have a realization of God, which you never had before. You had a simplistic understanding of God that he's here where it makes sense. You actually realize he's here even in hell. Suddenly he's a much bigger God than you ever thought he was. He's the God which defies comprehension, and he's vividly there. Because if not, this wouldn't be. Do you understand what that is? It means Daina Emes is a much more important bracha than Atoiva Ameitiv. That is a religious bracha. I don't know what you're doing, but you know what you're doing. Okay? That is the ultimate bracha. The bracha is that the Bach writes, why is it say, what's the Shem Shemavorchem ala Toiv, Kach Mavorchem ala Ra? So the Tur writes on the Rama writes also, it's a Tur. The Rama writes that on Toiv you do it be Simcha. And on Ra he says Belev Shalom. So he says, because there's no greater simcha to Ovdei Hashem to say Daina Emes Belev Shalom. They're happy that they're capable of saying it. And that's the Pshat, the Aliyah of the Dafka, the greatest Yerida is the ultimate Aliyah. So this is what he writes. He writes, Kvzeh Iker Tikunov Aliyato. B'pchinat Yerida Tachlit Aliyah. You know what that means? The Yerida is the ultimate Aliyah. The fact that you asked, where are you? And you came to the conclusion, he's here. Beyond my comprehension. That is the greatest usage of a sin. That is the greatest use. That is the tikkun itself. Hamur v'sfaki ayeh. Now this is very careful. Mekong fodol. I have to explain what that is. This is once again in the parsha. It said that Moshe will ask, the Jews will ask, what is his name? What your name? And he says, Eke asher eke. It literally case Sarah Sarah. I'll be whatever I will be. Remember the song, Alan? Okay, good. Case Sarah Sarah. Whatever will be, will be. The future is not for us to see. Blah blah blah, etc. So this is the idea. No, it's important. This is my youth. I'm I'm not going to acknowledge it. Today, see that as Ekash Eke. So whenever they do the Kriyas Torah, I hum that song. So this is what it is. You understand? What is Shem Eke? We have to have a klal. It's very important to understand. The last hey of the Bishemos are the realization. The realization is hey, it's Midas HaMalchus. Yud Kei Vav Kei is Chachma, Bina, Midas, and then finally the last hey is realization. So what you have is the spiritual reality coming to realization. I'm not going to start explaining Shemos. So what are the primary letters of the name Aleph Hey Yud Hey? The last hey is the realization of it. What is the name Aleph Yud Hey? Ayeh. What is that? You know what that is? The God beyond comprehension. The God you can only say, where are you? Ayeh. If a person encounters the God which is beyond comprehension, the Aleph Hey Yud, that's the Shem Eke. What my God is telling the Jews, brother dears, you're asking my name, you want to figure me out? I will always be there beyond comprehension. You guys are going to sin terribly. I'm not leaving. I'm there, okay? You guys are going to be in the worst situation possible. I'm there, okay? Now we can start saying I feel about Torah, but that's only positive. I'm talking about negative, okay? And the worst things possible, God's there. What does it mean? We don't know. I do know. I mean, he never leaves me. But how is that expressed? Beyond my comprehension. So this is what he says. The Shem is Ayeh, Aleph Yud Hey, which is the Isis of Shem Eke, okay, without the last Hey, because that's Sirus HaMalchus, the realization, Makam Kavayda. That is Makam Kavayda. This Makam means the source of. The source of the cover does not lie in the cover which can be comprehended. The source of covered lies in covered which is beyond comprehension, in the covered of Bereshis Maimer Sasum, which ultimately was reflected in Maimer Patuach, which now allows logic to be there and to understand. But there is a will of God beyond comprehension, and that is what you call Ayeh. Ki Ayeh Mikam Kvardo. So it's not like, it's literally where you ask the question, Aye, that's exactly the greatest makom covered possible. That is, that when you understand that he is there where it logically doesn't make sense, that is makom kvodah. He comes and says, kavod elyon shemamar elyon. That covered of the Aye, and yet I can't touch it. It's what my dad said. He was there. Okay? That is covered elyon. Smo, by the fact that he acknowledges that he asked that question, is bothered, but doesn't come to the conclusion, so there isn't anything. No, there is beyond comprehension. So he says, "Hu chozevo le'el kavod elyon." You actually connect to a sense of godliness and religion much more profound than you ever had before you fell into that pit. You know, on Tisha B'Av, I usually read a book by Dr. Yafa Elyach, Zichrono Livracha, called Hasidic Tales of the Holocaust. I read that, after choosing which kinnis I understand enough to say. Then I read that. That's a book, basically, stories of a very, very special person, a very wise rabbi called Rabbi Israel Shapiro. He was the Rebbe of Bluzhov. Footnote said he was probably the wisest man that ever existed in America post-war. He thought it was much wise. There are a lot of wise people. I don't want to go into names. He saw him as the wise man. He had enormous respect for him. And her footnote was no slouch. So I'm going to say it again. And he said, I don't want to compare because it's not nice, but Chekima de Yodoi, like his verses on Yeshua was Chekima de Yodoi. This man was Chekima de Yodoi. So there's different stories about his realizations during the Holocaust. It's all based on that. It's not Maisalach. It's describing man's encounter with God in the Holocaust through vivid stories. They describe there the idea of saying Shechianu in Yanufska death camp. You know what that is? That's the place which was in Spielberg's list. What's it called again? Not Spielberg's list, Schindler's List. There was a work camp in there where people were getting killed. So Janowska, this is outside of Krakow. It's very famous. People know it from there. That's why I use that example. People were killed there like flies, and they said Shechianu by Hanukkah candles, and they can't we say Shechianu? And then it says, yeah, we may die tomorrow, but now we're alive. And you know what it is? You suddenly realize what life is, even if life is only a minute. And when you say Shechianu, then you said Shechianu in a deeper way than you ever said before. Do you actually experience the fact that, yeah, I'm alive now? Oh, I die tomorrow. But I'm alive now. Even 1 minute of life, all of a sudden, is thanking for. Realize what that is? So you had to go to the pits to understand what Shechianu really means. It's when sometimes you never know, you understand things that you would never understand before. I think that a sense of justice found sometimes in places where there is or sense of humanity, in an era or a place where no one is humane, you suddenly see how unbelievable there are people which are willing to go to the biggest dangers because of the human morals, because of humanity. You see that, hey, humanity is something really very special. There are things we can't appreciate because we live in abundance, because it's all there. It's in the pits that you realize, wow, man is much greater than I ever thought he could be. Shechianu actually means something. Or you tell the story how important it is for circumcision, and you tell the story of a mother which asked a Nazi for his knife and she circumcised the child, and then she gets shot with the kid. There's certain things that you realize are important, which are there that we can't walk away from. It's what one would say. They can take everything, but take me from myself. Franco. Well, this is the me of humanity. There's certain things that are essential to humanity which no one can take away from. And you realize the depth of humanity. That's finding it in Aye. Only in the pits will we understand how great this is. Only in the pits I realize that God is way beyond comprehension. I'm going to stop asking questions. This doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. The word sense doesn't make sense when we talk about the God that I encountered in the Holocaust. Okay? So this is what he's saying here. He says, וזה עיקר תיקונו ועליות של פרינס יריד תחת העלייה מובא בספרים. כי איה מקום כבודו, וזה בחינת הכבוד העליון של מאמר העליון, דהיינו מאמר סתום בראשית כנ"ל, שמשם נשאר חיות במקורות אלו. You have to understand, all that was made for to ask Aye and to find it there. I made proud of my daddy that he came out of there saying God was with him. That was Aye Mekom Kvoidai. Nimsa Shemavakesh Umachapes Aye Mekom Kvoidai. If that's what you're looking for in the pits, but that atzmai, that search, that quest, that doubt, that brings you to the highest level. You're doubting and you're questioning, but not turning your back on it, but coming to a conclusion which is true. That is the ultimate aliyah from these places. You actually now you give life and meaning and purpose to that fall. That fall. Your ultimate growth. What deeper understanding of God can be than understanding God is with me even in hell? What is the idea of a korban olah? The Gemara says korban olah is mechaper. The Gemara in Erchin is mechaper al hirur halev. An olah is mechaper al machshavas ros. K'mo shamru Chazal. What that mean? K'mo shekatuv oleh al ruchachem she'olah mechaper al hirur. Why? What does it mean? Why is a korban olah mechaper al hirur? Ki yesh b'chinat libis charchar. There's an idea of my heart going around in circles. This means to say, Kiyesh klipa she'ima kemisum sevevis alev. There's when you say klipa, it means a consciousness of externalities. Okay? Klipa is a husk. The klipa means say there's a consciousness of externalities which can drive you nuts. Tell me about it. Okay? If I drink the cup, ubi kumim v'sivuvim bilbulim harbe. Klipat noga. You know what noga means? Noga means it's not opaque. You can see through it. Light can go through it, but it really can be distorted. Now, dvarim mutarim are called klipat noga. Dvarim asurim are called shalosh klipas atmei. They come from a very opaque husk. No light can be seen. It's only maimer sasu. I can't get anything out of it. But klipas noiga means to say it shines. It's a husk which radiates. It all comes from language of Yechezkel and the Merkava, okay? For noiga la saviv. You can read that if you want on your own. The idea is that there's externalities, but they're redeemable because you can see covered shemayim in there. You can see it. You can take a behema kshera or a yerek kosher if it's not tevel, and you can eat it, and that energy can be expressed in your body, and ultimately you're energized. Hopefully you eat healthy foods. You'll be able to do Torah mitzvahs. Okay? It's what's called, what's mutter, not what's usher. We're going back to the Rebbe Rashab now. The stuff which is mutter is mabalbo es halev. What does schar schar mean? Look at the Targum. Schar means around and around. It goes, you go around in circles. Saviv, saviv, schor, schor. Saviv brings the pasuk in Yechezkel. Ku pchinat tirgum kamuva. It's a translation of things. You don't have it the way it is. You have a way of, oh, I mean this and I mean that, whatever. When you fall into moisros, you fall into klipas noiga, you fall into pleasure seeking of this world. Everything that Rebbe Rashab discussed, which he pointed out is not a good thing to do. A man falls into taivus of Eilam Hazeh. Join the club. Let's go to a restaurant and let's really pile it on. Okay, it's kosher. It has, I still remember once, never forget. I once drove in a car with Reb Aaron, and he says, what do you think the pshat is in Nenu Misudasa Shoisei Rasha? That they're part of the festivities. So he says, I saw an advertisement of a nightclub having a Purim party in Greenwich Village, in the old days of the village, and had an OU Hechsher. I says, this is it. It was Kulei Taivus. It was even kosher. Don't you understand that strafe? Wow. Then he went and said, how much taxes did this Achashverosh have to make this enormous meal? How many people had to pay taxes and suffer for nobility to this was a totally immoral, this is his typical Rabbard, a totally immoral meal. But it had kosher, it had OU Hechsher, had a badask, its own ish v'ish. You only ate according to what was, it was kosher, but it was a nightclub. It was hedonism. And hedonism with a Hechsher. Well, we all fall there. This is the Nanim I say Russia, the Achashverosh. I remember Baron going on. Typically, him, he's very, very, very unbelievable ethical person, and he saw that like everywhere. This is every person has his agenda. He saw that everywhere because he reflected his purity. So this is the people fall into tivus. Yeah, we fall into externalities and we look for pleasure. This is called mekamas atanofis. So he's not even going to the ugly things of sin. He's going into falling into the type of mazeh. Everything that we learned in the Rebbe Rashab, here it goes. This is also Mekayim Tunafim. Says, how do you get out of that by saying Ayim Mekayim K'vayday? You fell into externalities. Where is God in this? The answer is, yeah. It's not just for me not to do it. Now that I'm here. It's for me to acknowledge, yes, in a place which seems to be devoid of God, God is here. God is the source of all this. And this is the God which is incomprehensible. You know, walk out of Taibas by being mizbainin in the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is what the Rebbe writes in Kuntres Umaayon by learning deeper and deeper what Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad means, and delving into, I don't want to say the word chassidus, understanding the oimik. As far as I'm concerned, learn Yemer Nevuchim Be'iyun Rav, learning the oimik of what infinity of one God is. That is what redeems us from Taivus. That's what redeems us from Taivus. When you fall into Taivus and you realize, man, it's pretty stupid. I told you once, I once took a boy to a nightclub. He was in a very bad place. He was a student of mine. In YU, he got turned off, and he was in a very bad place. I mean, his girlfriend had to remind him about Yom Kippur. So, I said, I was, I keep in contact with all of them. That's the way it is. You don't turn your back to your kids. You don't turn your back to your student. That's never push it. So I did one thing I never did before, and I put on jeans and I went to a bar on St. John's Avenue near Columbia, near NYU actually. That's where you can get your fake licenses. You can get yourself a high. You can get yourself, it's about tattoos. And there's bars there near for the college boys. I never did this before. I went into a bar. And I spent 3 hours in the freaking bar. Now, I can be very funny and describe when I dealt with this voluptuous waitress that threw herself all over me, trying to convince me through her body to pay $20 for a shot. And I just told the honey child, I can go across the street buy the freaking bottle for $40. Why would I pay $20 for a shot? Because you're putting yourself on the table. Move yourself. No, I'm a cold-minded, blooded reptile when it comes to these things. I work with that. And we sat for 3 hours just listening to what Simon and Garfunkel would call dangling conversations. Literally people, talking without listening, it was unbelievable. And we saw how low you can become when you're just looking for Taivas. It was an unbelievable experience. I don't want to say what at the end. Took a while. Today, the man's happily married, 2 children, lives in a very frum area of, 5 towns you want to know. Haven't married to a nice Jewish girl. It learns Daf Yomi, thank God. And many times I attributed to the fact that I took him down to the pits. and he realized the covered Shema, that God is beyond comprehension because man is lower than low. Because once you go into Taivas, God knows the only way to walk away from it is understanding there is Echad Elokeinu b'shamayim v'aretz. So this is what we have over here. Okay, I'm going to stop now. Just want to say just the last two lines of the show. Azay mevakesh v'tzoek ayei mekom kvodo ze ba'atzmo tikuno ki chozeh v'shav el kavod ha'yon shu b'chinat ayei. Just remember that. So next time a kid asks why, you say, bravo, great question. Where is he? Good question. That's what you should be doing. We have to encourage that, but we also have to encourage the world of thought, which understands what the oneness of God means. So I pray and wish that we will all somehow say Kriya Shema with Havonas HaEchad. And the more we understand that, the more we'll walk away from Taibis. And next 2 weeks, we'll go back to Kuntres Umaayon. In light of this, I can now explain what the Rebbe says over there. So then I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bracha v'atzlacha.